Okay, so now I'm gonna go through opening the pot. And when we open our pot, I use my pointer finger for my dominant hand, but there are many ways to do this the same way. Some people will use their thumbs, some people will use their hands stacked together, but I like to use my pointer finger. And when I open, I find the center point of my clay. I want the furthest part of my finger forward to be just behind center. So that if you have fingernails, I don't, would be the very longest part of your fingernail is gonna be just behind center. I'm gonna use my tool to create a little mark that will sort of show us where center is. If I open and I am behind center, I'm gonna end up with a little nub in the middle of my clay. If I sort of erase that and I open, I'm going to draw that line again, and I open in front of center, I end up with a line indented in the side of my clay. What we want to do here is, just like I mentioned before, we want to open just behind center. So I'm going to illustrate what that looks like now. I'm going to make my line again. And I'm putting my finger in my hands for you so that you can see really well. Throw a little bit of water on there. I want to come just behind center as I open. And when I do that, I will end up with an unobstructed opening. There's no dot in the center, there's no line in the behind, and it just has to do with your finger's placement being just behind the center point. When we open our pot, our cylinder, we want to pull out from the center to create our opening. But when we're compressing our floor, we want to compress from the outside in. And that's because if we're right-handed or left-handed, if we throw with our wheel going counterclockwise, we're getting particle alignment spinning with the spin of the wheel. Well, what that means is that when this pot is under tension drying, if it's going to crack, it's going to crack in the bottom center in the direction of the spin of the wheel, yielding what we call an S-crack. Well, to avoid those S-cracks, if we compress in towards center, we're pushing particle density into the middle, and we're making it so that this center section is dense with particles and less likely to crack in an S shape. So I typically do this 3 or 4 times, and I'm moving from the outside in, and I'm not putting pressure directly down. I'm sort of putting pressure diagonally inward. And my goal is not only to compress that floor, but also to make it nice and flat and even while pushing particle density in towards center. Have you ever pulled up your wall and ended up with an irregular rim? If you do, the real way to fix this would be to pull up your wall evenly and not have this rim become irregular. But we don't live in a perfect world, and so there are a couple tips and tricks to fix this. So one of the ways to do that is to take your wire tool, wrap it around your finger like you would dental floss, and try to come in around 3 o'clock with your finger on the inside and the outside of your clay, dropping just below the lowest point of the rim and allowing it to make a full rotation. So I'm going to sit here for a second, and then I'm going to go down, allow it to make a rotation, and remove. And we should be able to remove an even amount of material from the rim, leaving an even rim. I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to make my cut. I'm going to go just below the lowest point of the rim, stop my wheel, and then I can remove this piece of clay from the irregular rim. I'm going to do it one more time so I can try to get this nice and clean and look like I'm a professional. All right, so that's what it looks like. Now we can just come back in and we can compress our rim by supporting on either side, applying a bit of pressure, and we will have a nice, smooth rim. So I'm going to show you how to create an undercut that diverts the clay away from the form. So typically when you're undercutting, I see a lot of students coming in at 90 degrees and they sort of go in and your clay will merge with the pot, similar to what I showed before. Sometimes you'll even come in here, or worse, you come in like this, parallel to the pot. And what I want to do is actually shift my tool to divert the clay away from the form. So I'm coming in with an angle that is opposite to the spin of the clay, and I'm just gonna very slowly come in, and you'll see that my clay just diverts right away from the form, instead of flipping up and becoming part of the pot. So again, I'm gonna show you that one more time. We're gonna sort of like compress this clay down, create our little buttress at the bottom, that little like tapered out piece. And then I'm putting my clay away, or I'm putting my wooden knife tool away, and I'm using the acute angle of the tool to divert the clay away from the form, just like that. I can show you a couple times now what not to do. We definitely don't want to do this. We definitely don't want to come in here and smush our clay up against the pot. I'm sure that a lot of you have seen these, little remnants, and then you're sort of chasing this around and sort of squishing it in, and you're making sort of a mess on the side of your pot. If you come in at a 90-degree angle, again, some of that material will come off, but some of it will leave this kind of dirty undercut. I'm going to kind of make this one, worse, and then I'm going to show you again. We're going to divert our clay away from the form so that we get a nice, crisp, clean undercut. When I undercut for this bowl, I want to create an undercut that diverts my clay away. The goal of my undercut is to create a channel that allows the wire to move underneath of my pot. And so I'm just going to use the acute angle of this knife tool to create a small undercut that diverts my clay away from the form. Now that I've removed that clay, I have a nice clean channel which will allow me to wire my pot off nice and clean. I'm going to take my wire, I'm going to wrap it around my hands, and I'm going to cut underneath of my pot. If your pot's really wet, you might cut twice. And then I'm just going to take my pot and carefully lift it from the wheel.